Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber bring up a hypothesis, which I'm going to flip in here for you guys, and it has to do with appetite-related hormones, fat cell multiplication, and all of that interesting stuff when it comes to appetite. And this is a good topic to cover because yesterday I spent a whole video talking about chronic undereaters, and now we're going to talk a little bit about chronic overeaters and some of the hypotheses that are out there regarding that. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, do a little bit of crafting, and let's talk about it. Because what people need to understand, they'll say silly things, and people who don't overeat don't always understand this. They'll talk about willpower, and people just need willpower. It's like, well, it's not really that simple, because you are dealing with brain hormones. You are dealing with hormones in the brain. You don't have any willpower outside of your brain chemistry. All of your willpower originates with the hormones and chemicals in your brain. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So when you start messing with those hormones, willpower goes away. That's like telling someone who is a heroin addict, they just need more willpower. No, it won't help. What they need to do is avoid heroin, because a heroin addict doesn't have enough willpower to just cut their dose of heroin down to 10% of what they use. If the heroin is available, they're going to use it. They're not going to regulate it. And no amount of willpower is going to help them with that because it deals with dopamine and brain chemistry. And when it comes to chronic overeating, we have learned there are a number of hormones involved, and actually as many as a dozen different hormones involved that regulate appetite in humans. And like with anything else, you can sit there and have all the willpower you want, but you take someone and they get hungry enough and you put them in a room and lock them in a room with a whole chocolate cake. How long will their willpower last? 12 hours? 24 hours? See what I mean, guys? 2 days? Eventually you're going to eat that whole cake, particularly if they crave sweets on top of it. Let's say they have a dopamine and a ghrelin issue in their brain. How long does willpower last? So that's one of the reasons that I bring up for people who suffer from chronic binge eating and people who are chronic overeaters due to the hormones in their brain, the best advice is to realize that willpower is not going to do shit for you. Willpower is not going to do shit for you. You need to keep chocolate cake out of your house. You need to keep pizza out of your house. That's the only thing that's going to work for you. If you don't have those things laying around ready for you to eat, you can't eat them. And if you do have something that it's a milder snack, I don't know, Cheez-Its or whatever you have around the house, maybe reduced fat Cheez-Its, or even your lower calorie snacks, put them up on the highest shelf. Push them further back. You got to actually give yourself a situation to where you have to work harder and second think to reach something that you might overeat. Those are strategies also, because it's not about willpower, it's about cravings. It's about giving your brain time to say, whoa, I don't need to grab this and eat this. If you don't give yourself that, you will fail every time if you're a chronic overeater. Chronic overeaters can't do moderation. So let's discuss a little bit of what's going on there. Now, one theory is that because we've noticed that when people gain large amounts of body fat, when they reach the obesity level, they don't just grow the size of their fat cells. All right? Just like with muscles, if you train a muscle, you eat enough protein, more protein goes into that muscle, you lift weights, you stimulate protein synthesis, what happens? Those individual muscle cells, which the fibers are on the ends of, they get bigger, right? You don't grow new muscle cells. Drugs can cause you to grow new muscle cells. But generally, just lifting weights and eating protein doesn't give you new muscle cells. It just makes your cells bigger. That happens with fat cells also. That's called hypertrophy. Hypertrophy doesn't apply to just muscle. It applies to everything in your body. It means muscles get bigger. However, there's also something called hyperplasia, which, muscles generally only do that with certain drugs involved. But hyperplasia means creating new cells. Not necessarily your cells getting bigger, but little new small ones forming or bigger ones splitting into two. Well, when people reach the obesity level of body fat, when they reach that threshold, it looks like from the data we've had over the years, they start seeing hyperplasia happen in those fat cells. Well, that's interesting because what that does, it doesn't just make one big fat cell that gets bigger, because a lot of you, when you look at it, you look at the size of an object. A fat cell is a globular-like sphere. I mean, it can be all weird shape, but it's roughly spherical. Loosely. But when you take stuff like that and you smush them all together, nutrients have to pass through a barrier to get in or out of there. So if you're gaining a lot of fat, it seems that your body does that because you have more energy you need to store. You've got to remember, we're designed to survive famines and ice ages. Our body wants to store that extra energy and save it away when we overeat, right? So that we can survive the next famine or the next ice age. That's why humans get fat really, really easy. I mean, as a species, we get fat easy. A lot of other animals don't get as fat as we do, as easy as we do. We're very, very good at storing fuel, and that's what fat is. It's stored fuel. And so what it does, it realizes that the more surface area you have per volume of fat, the more membrane you have. The bigger surface area you have of each cell to get more nutrients through. So it can store that energy easier. So it tends to start creating new cells, splitting them up so that it gets more cell membranes. So again, for the same pound of fat, if you have twice as many cells versus another pound of fat, the pound of fat with twice as many cells is going to have more surface area for energy to pass through to get that fat stored easier, right? It makes the storage more efficient, which if you're trying to slow down your body fat gain, that is not a good thing for you. But your body's not ever trying to slow down body fat gain. It wants to put that fat away. That's what we're geared to do. So it increases the numbers. And what we've noticed is that when people start dieting, a lot of times those cells just shrink. They don't always reduce the number back down. So then what you end up with, even if you lose, let's say you were at almost overweight range, right on that edge, and then you gained 30 pounds of fat really quickly, within 6 months. What happens is when you gain new cells, it starts splitting up. You might end up with almost twice as many fat cells as a result of that. But then what happens when you lose 30 pounds of fat, the fat cells, the new cells don't go away, they just get smaller. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means you have more surface area on that fat. Now, we could argue that that would make fat loss easier also, and that's something people need to remember this. They're thinking only in one direction. That membrane also means that fat travels the other direction more easily out of there. So it means people who have more surface area technically are going to be better at yo-yo dieting. They're going to be better at gaining weight, and they're going to be better at losing weight when they're really obese. Because, again, your body has it there so that it can get that energy when it needs it easier also. All right? You can extract that energy. So it goes both directions. But that does mean that those people are going to be really, really good at yo-yo dieting. Back and forth. They got a lot of surface area to work with. The downside, there is one theory that says that the surface area of the fat cells, because fat has a metabolically active situation, and it also produces hormones and things, is that extra surface area could potentially trigger two different hormones in the body differently. And that's ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is an appetite hormone. Ghrelin makes you hungry, and it makes your priorities shift. Like when your ghrelin levels start going up, you start craving either sweet foods or fatty foods or more, or both, more. You start preferring those things when ghrelin's elevated, meaning when ghrelin is up, a big fatty cut of steak is going to look more appetizing to you than a lean chicken or turkey breast will. All right? A piece of cake is going to look more appetizing to you than a whole wheat turkey sandwich with nothing sweet put on it. All right, you're going to prefer the fattier foods and the sweeter foods more. They're just going to look more appetizing to you. You're going to look at them, and that's going to be the one that you want more. That's what ghrelin does. Obviously, ghrelin is fantastic for helping you bulk up for hibernation for the winter. But it's not so good if you're trying to regulate body fat. And it does a number of other things in the body too. But there's a theory that those extra fat cell membranes make production of ghrelin a little higher, and they reduce production of leptin. That's another theory. Leptin, for people who want to lose fat, is an amazing hormone. Why? Leptin is a hormone that seems to blunt appetite. Leptin not only blunts appetite, it regulates metabolism. Meaning higher leptin levels can cause your muscle cells to want to be more active, essentially. It will tend to make your metabolism go up just a tiny, tiny little bit. I'm not talking 1,000 calories. We're talking, a couple calories. Elevated leptin levels might increase your metabolism 0.5%. Now, that doesn't mean a lot, but if you're trying to lose body fat or trying to not gain body fat, having a 0.5% faster metabolism is a good thing, right? I mean, we all agree a little more metabolism could make a big difference over several months as far as how much fat you gain or how much fat you lose. That adds up. In fact, it's arguable that from a fat loss perspective, as we start to understand more about these, that if we could start making a synthetic leptin, that actually might be the ultimate diet drug. Why? Because it's your body's natural appetite blunting hormone. It's the hormone that your brain uses every day to tell you that you're full. Like elevated leptin levels usually happen sometimes after you have a big meal and you start to get full and your stomach hurts. Your body starts producing leptin to say, hey, you need to stop eating. We're full. We don't need any more. Or you've started gaining weight too fast sometimes and you're not a chronic overeater who overproduces ghrelin. Sometimes leptin will start going up, so your body will make you less hungry. It'll make you want to be more energetic and less hungry if you're putting on weight too quickly for people who have normal ghrelin and leptin levels. Now, the argument here is that people who've been previously overweight don't have normal levels, meaning they produce more ghrelin due to that higher surface area, and it will counteract that leptin. And that's not a good thing because that means your appetite is always going to be a bigger problem for you than other people. If you've lost that 30 or 50 pounds you previously had, that can become a problem. Now, people need to remember this is hypothetical and it's only one theory that's out there, but it would explain yo-yo dieters really, really well because we do see a lot of that. I mean, yo-yo dieting is insanely common. How many people do we know who gain and lose 30 pounds, 40 pounds every single year? And I don't mean bodybuilders bulking and cutting. I mean the average person. You maybe have an aunt who does that, or a cousin, or someone that you know, a good coworker of yours you worked with for years, who it seems like, you know, they put on 40 pounds or so every winter and then they crash diet it off and then 6 months later they regain it all. All right, that's possibly what we're seeing here, is this overproduction of ghrelin due to the higher surface area of their fat cells because they have more fat cells now. It's an interesting hypothesis. Now, someone had said, hey, do you think that's happening with you? Maybe, maybe. But the thing is with me, I've always had an insane appetite. And I think the appetite in my family is genetic. And because there are quite a few obese people, but also strength athletes in my family, including NFL. But again, talking 300 plus pound NFL. So it does seem to run in my family. And I notice in my case, yeah, I crave fatty foods year round. I don't crave sweets. Like, sweets are okay, but if you give me a choice other than on a holiday, I mean, I love pecan pie and apple pie and cherry pie on a holiday, but I don't sit around craving them. Like, I don't walk through a store and see an apple pie fresh there and say, man, I'd really love that. I can go, well, that made me hungry to smell it, but I could eat a turkey sandwich just as easily and get the same enjoyment from it. Like, I don't crave sweets, but fatty foods, I crave the fuck out of them. Like, you drop me down 2 pounds of rare sirloin steak, I'll eat that whole thing in one go. Drop a large pizza in front of me, I might not be able to stop with the first 3 slices. Once I start eating that pizza with that combined salty, fatty taste, I might eat the whole pizza before I even know what happened. Same thing, man. I crack open a jar of natural peanut butter, 2 spoons, hell no, man. I'm licking the bottom and trying to get a knife to scrape the bottom out of it within 10 minutes. So for me, I crave fatty foods, and that's why I can't really have many of them in the house, and I don't keep those sort of things around often because I know that I will eat the fuck out of them. So for me, that's my weakness. Like, I can have sweets around all day long because, I mean, in fact, if I eat a bunch of sweets or pecan pie or whatever for a holiday, it makes me even feel nauseous if I eat too much sweets, and then I don't want sweets for like 2 weeks. Like, sometimes that'll happen to me. It's the opposite with the sweets. Like, I'll actually get nauseous and don't want to eat a piece of pie. You hand me another piece of pie the next day and I'll push it away. If I have too many sweets in one go, like, I don't want them. They're actually, I lose my desire for them from eating them, like, for a while if I eat too many. But it's not like that with fatty foods. Fatty foods I crave the fuck out of 24/7. Love them. So, but that's also the thing is that craving for fatty foods, that bottomless pit appetite is, again, it's a sign of elevated ghrelin. But I've always had that. So maybe it could be genetic traits for some overeaters. Is that this thing we're seeing with the yo-yo dieters is the fact that maybe some people are just born with more fat cells than others. Now that could contribute to the ghrelin thing. And if that's you, then you're going to need to be aware of that. And what people need to understand, that could also be what we're seeing with a lot of yo-yo dieters, because the people didn't get fat because they had no appetite. I mean, so people always, they talk about this theory in the sense that, oh yeah, these people after they got fat, they have appetite problems after they lose weight later. Well, yeah, but people who don't have appetite problems don't tend to get obese the first time to begin with. So that's kind of the crux in this theory, is that, that doesn't always explain why do you have people who have just as high of an appetite as that their entire life before they ever get obese. And that's the thing. And, the solutions there, I think, since we don't fully understand the theory and we don't have drugs to deal with it yet, I personally think the solutions, I think if it fits your macros in moderation, is the worst idea ever for people who are genetically obese, because genetic obesity isn't caused by slow metabolism. The whole thyroid metabolism thing is complete bullshit. It's appetite. It is completely appetite. These people don't have slower metabolisms. I don't have a slow metabolism. I have a fast metabolism, but I have an insane appetite. So I think that if it fits your macros, like I said, it's great for the chronic undereater. Those people, that's awesome for the reasons I described in the other video. But I think trying to do moderation and trying to eat 300 calories of ice cream for someone who has a genetic biological appetite problem, which most people who are obese do, that's how they get obese, I think it's a bad idea. I think food avoidance is the best solution, and people talk about an unhealthy relationship with food. No, it's not psychological in nature, it's hormonal in nature. That's like saying a heroin addict has an unhealthy relationship with opiates. Well, no shit. It's because there's a dopamine response and he's addicted to them. He's physically addicted. And food addictions do exist, but they are hormonal and biochemical in nature. And I think as a general rule, people who are chronic overeaters, their trigger foods that make them overeat, and I know what my trigger foods are personally, I think that the best option is not to try to eat them in moderation. I think it's to not keep them in your damn house at all. If you don't want to overeat those foods, you need to keep them away. And if you know that you crave pizza or you crave ice cream, and that once you start eating it, you're not going to stop, the wisest choice you can make is to keep that stuff out of your home. Reserve it for special holidays. Reserve it for special occasions only, but not food that you have available to you year round. Because I think, again, that's literally like having a drug addict in your family and keeping whole bottles of pills and stuff in the house. If you have a drug addict who lives in your family and lives in your home, you probably want to keep all your pain pills locked away. You don't want to have them out there where this person has to try to control themselves and have moderation. It's just not a wise idea. It's probably not going to go well for you or for them. It's just common sense. And it's the same thing for chronic overeaters. We need to keep our trigger foods out of the home. And obviously exercise is a big deal, because people who are chronically overeaters, it's not just trigger foods alone, but any food in general. We're going to tend to eat more. We're going to be hungrier. And I think weightlifting and I think cardio are your best friends. Absolutely your best friends. You need to be doing less cardio every day. If you're a person who is genetically overweight due to appetite, I think doing cardio every day for the rest of your life is really going to be necessary for you. I don't think people who are like that can really afford to not do cardio of some type every day. My opinion on it. It's a strategy I've learned with myself and observing other people. I think daily cardio, minimum 30 minutes to an hour of bliss, even if it's just walking around the block every single day for 30 minutes and you get home from work, I think it shouldn't be optional. It's something you're just going to have to do, because it's going to let you burn more calories and it's going to take your mind off food while you're doing it. That's 30 minutes to an hour where you can't possibly eat. And instead you're burning calories. And again, obviously weightlifting, for the fact that weightlifting speeds up metabolism. Faster metabolism is your friend when you have a high appetite. And the upside, if you have a high appetite, getting big as fuck is not going to be that hard for you. Like, you're never going to be the hard gainer who struggles to gain muscle mass. You're always going to find it easy to gain muscle mass, because you're always going to be able to eat food. You're always going to have training fuel. You're always going to have recovery fuel. Like, gaining muscle for the overeater, is almost as easy as it is for the hard gainer on steroids, on moderate amounts of steroids in my experience. So it is what it is. But these are just strategies that you have to adopt, since we don't fully understand these hormones and we don't understand them enough to block them and regulate them yet in the body. All you can do is just basic, sound lifestyle choices. And it doesn't matter what other people think. Oh, you have a eating disorder because you can't keep those foods in your house. And it's like, well, who gives a fuck how you classify it? You need to be focusing on your health and not worry about what other people say. It doesn't matter what someone else thinks about that. If you know that that trigger food will fuck your diet up, the best thing you can do is keep it out of your home. Don't buy it. Don't have it laying around. Don't have it stored away in the freezer. Keep it the fuck out of your house. If you got 7 trigger foods, you need to keep all 7 of them out of your house. Real simple. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.